and I'm here to help you make sense of your dollars. Welcome to Dollars and Cents, the show that breaks down the financial world in ways that matter to you. No jargon, no confusion, just real conversations about money, your money. So join me every Wednesday at 10 a.m. on WESN for Dollars and Cents.
Are you driven, ambitious, and ready to earn? WESN, the content capital, is expanding, and we're looking for dynamic media sales executives to join our team. Sell powerful advertising solutions across television, digital, and social media platforms, and help brands tell their story. If you have strong communication skills, a passion for sales, and the drive to succeed, join WESN today. Send your CV to marketing@wsncc.com or WhatsApp 68-61662 and start building your future.
Hi, I am Beechan, and I am a mental health and conflict resolution consultant. Welcome to Mind Matters, the show where we explore the intricate world of mental health and the art of conflict resolution. Join us as we hear from mental health professionals, conflict resolution experts, and everyday people who have transformed their lives through understanding and communication. Mind Matters, WESN Content Capital.
Something very important, there is an intrinsic neurotrophic factor that is released via myokines, that is some peptides that we have in our muscle that produce neuromodulation and increase that peptide in the brain to increase the neurocognitive of the brain.
I'm glad you said that. Right. So exercise has an important part to play in the aging brain. As we get older, our gray matter does shrink. We have reduction of synapses, but exercise is shown to actually improve our cognitive functioning.
Totally.
WESN.
Good morning and welcome to AM Prime on WESN. I am your host, Takia Thompson, for our Talk It Out Tuesday segment. As students have returned to the classroom following the Easter break, concerns are being raised about school safety amid the escalation in school violence. We address this topic in our Beyond the Headlines segment. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has since increased its presence at schools, while also issuing a warrant to motorists to exercise caution in and around school zones. This morning, we're joined by TTPS Assistant Superintendent Owe Russell to discuss the measure being put in place to ensure a safe return to school. Good morning, Mr. Russell.
Good morning, ma'am. Let me say good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, on behalf of my Commissioner of Police. deputy commissioners, assistant commissioners, and first and second division officers of the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. It's a pleasure being here again.
Thank you so much for joining us. So we're going to jump right in. School has reopened after the Easter holiday. As school violence cases continue to occur, officers have been deployed in schools to ensure student safety. Can you give us an update on how this process is going, as well as an officer's role in these circumstances?
Well, we would want to appreciate that the school-oriented policing program was born out of the increase in violence in the schools among school children. Since its inception, which I think was a very, very, very good idea, we have seen a reduction in the fights within the school. But what has happened is that we have seen some fights popping up along the school, the vicinity of the school, but outside of the school. So with that, we pivot, we adjust, we analyze, we redeploy, to really improve the situation and the services that we provide. Because when you look at it, it's about continuous review, assessment of the effectiveness of the program. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service remains committed to ensuring the safety and security of the students, the teachers, the school communities through proactive engagement, visible policing, and collaborative partnerships with our stakeholders in the education sector.
And in your perspective and from your experience, what is some of the main factors that contribute to school violence?
There are a lot of factors that contribute to school violence. And, we have to start by looking at the situation at home, the family environment, the frequency of domestic violence or even aggression within the home. Children that are exposed to violence at home, of course, will replicate their behavior in schools. So what they're being taught at home, they will definitely replicate in school because this is all that they know. Mm-hmm. We have to look at things like the poverty and the socioeconomic stress within families at home as well, which would contribute to this. A lot of the times, quite a few children are product of single home, single parenting environments where the breadwinner goes out and they are left at home to more or less supervise themselves. And we always talk about the days where it took a village to raise a child. However, we are seeing persons have moved away from that sense of communal living, and it's like, a difference now, more negative kind of situation going on. Limited access to opportunities also lead to frustration. Some students experience low self-worth, and that contributes to their aggression. It has also been linked strongly to economic equality. Then we have the gang culture, which is something that we hear daily within the news networks and the social media platforms in Trinidad and Tobago. Because Trinidad and Tobago have a broader issue with gang violence and drugs and illegal firearms, and young people are influenced by these things. Some of them witness a lot of it in their communities as well. Mm-hmm. Regional data has also shown that there is data that shows that a lot of this violence is generated by trafficking and guns and organized crimes that persons see in the neighborhoods as well. And then they come into school, and with the gang thing is that there is the sad thing about it is that there is no real morals or values. A leader of a gang will recruit your child at the earliest possible stage.
Yeah.
So parenting is a critical rule, and being there and telling your children that you love them, showing them that care, that nurturing, that love, that support that is necessary. We look at peer and social influence. students are influenced by peers a lot of the times who may encourage bullying, which is another issue that we have. Then we have the next, I don't want to say, let me put it this way, then we have the next issue of social media, where children are influenced to doing things just because of the likes.
Yeah.
They want that likes, that like it makes them look like a hero, like a star boy, like a star girl. These conflicts and continuous fights that we see on social media, they get some kind of glory for that. Bullying, we look at conflict resolution skills. Children, a lot of children, we realize that there's a need to not introduce, because there is conflict mediation training going on within schools, but maybe there would be called for some sort of ramping up, some sort of increasing of the community conflict resolution programs, where we have children who would be trained, and we want to thank the Officium Training Limited, who partnered with Trinidad and Tobago Police Service to introduce this community conflict resolution center, which operates out of the Maraca St. Joseph Police Station, where they would have trained over 3,000 students in conflict resolution, mediation, de-escalation, and anger management. Then we have something like the School Children Challenges, where you look at the educational gap, because now every child is placed in a secondary school, and sometimes they are placed there, and even the educators are not certain if they would have met the educational threshold to move on to secondary school. So there are children entering secondary school that may have problems reading. And when they are called upon before their peers in the school and other children laugh at them or they are ridiculed, they tend to act in a violent way, or you may see behaviors where they no longer want to come to school, because at the end of the day, who really wants to be laughed at?
Yeah.
And then we're looking at the lack of positive youth engagement, like limited access to activities. We speak about sporting programs, etc., skills. And I think it's high time that the school system focus heavily on really having a program for children that may not be so academically inclined. Because if you speak with children and you take that time with them, you would understand that every child has some dream, some goal, or something that they want to do in their lives. And it's for us now to show them, to help them achieve that goal so that they can channel their passion towards that. Let's say, for instance, we have a child that decides as a student that wants to be a mechanic because of their love for motor vehicles.
Yeah.
That student could end up being one of the best mechanics in Trinidad and Tobago. And we have to really look at these things and encourage the stakeholders. We have a lot of motor vehicle dealers in Trinidad and Tobago. We have a lot of fabricating institutions for children who may be interested in welding. We have a heavy construction sector in Trinidad and Tobago where children could learn to utilize their hand. And I'm not talking child labor, but I'm asking that the stakeholders, the contractors, etc., the business owners come and really share of their time to help retool and reskill these children. So when you look at school violence, we can say is really a reflection of the wider societal issues that we now face. Home, the community, school, and the national crime environment itself equals youth behavior. And we must take these things into consideration. We, as upstanding citizens and members of the society, we have to want to do the right thing as well. It's not just about, and even parents, it's not just about doing as I say and not as I do, but it's about encouraging your children to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And we ask that the parents, the guardians, the relatives, and the adult population of Trinidad and Tobago make their best effort to lead by example so that we can have a better Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you for that. And yes, on Sunday, the TTPS has issued a warning to motorists. What should drivers be mindful of as schools reopen?
Drivers. I sometimes when you speak of drivers, it's like sometimes you really don't know where to start. Time after time, you would hear us caution drivers, especially around long weekends. Yet still, we would still see a high number of accidents. So what we want to tell drivers, please understand that school has reopened. So the luxuries you enjoyed for the last 2 weeks, where you would have left home 15 minutes, half an hour, 20 minutes later, and still get to your destination on time, it does not exist anymore. We are asking that you are vigilant on the road, that you obey speed limits, that you obey traffic signs, that you respect the zebra crossing. We ask that you look out for children crossing the road. We ask that you have patience. We ask the motorists to not engage in indiscriminate parking around the school zones when they go to drop off their children and their loved ones. We ask them to leave the cellular phone alone. Ensure that the children in your vehicles are secured and protected via means of their seatbelt. And in situations where a booster seat is needed, and we ask that you make sure that you have one, because I would tell you, the interesting thing about it is that everybody know what they have to do, but when they are ticketed for not doing the right thing, everyone has a problem with the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service. And we are not out there to ticket anybody, but we want to see changed behavior. We want to see positive behavior. We want the parents also to take an interest, because some of them may hire persons to transport their children to and from schools. And we ask the parents in that case to be vigilant as well. And when I say vigilant, you must know the driver. You must ensure that his or her driver's permit is indeed valid, and that the vehicle that is being used to transport your children is indeed insured and has passed inspection and is roadworthy. So you are now forced to do your own due diligence to ensure the safety of your children. So it's an amalgamation of things. Have that conversation with your children. Teach them how to cross the road properly. And for far too long, we have seen persons getting knocked down under the walkover. And I'm certain you would have seen that as well.
Yeah.
Or the walkover is just mere feet away. But persons choose, and I mean, I myself sometimes do it, but I have, decided to really set a better example with respect to that. So we need to be that example and teach our children the right way, teach our children what is expected of them to and from school, to the drivers, the taxi and maxi drivers, even parents. Be careful when you're having your children just cross in front of the vehicle. And what I say is this, I mean, persons exit out of maxi taxis might be on the priority bus route or the Eastern Main Road, etc. And there's a driver coming down on that same lane, and the person crosses in front of the maxi taxi. That driver who is coming down may only see that person when they appear in front of their vehicle, which indeed will be too late. So we are asking for proper road practices and teach the children the correct thing.
So then would you say that around schools that there would be an increase in patrols or traffic enforcement?
Of course, we always have an increase in traffic patrols and enforcement, especially when school is open. And this is something that we have put into practice quite a few years ago. When I was in the Western Division, we always have what we call a school patrol. And it is twofold and multi-pronged in the sense that it's not only there to regulate the traffic, but the patrol is also there to minimize the occurrences of school fights and school conflicts as well. So it's something that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has engaged in, and even from the Highway and Traffic Patrol branch, for drivers who would choose to use the shoulder, we have our motorcyclist section as well as the Traffic and Highway Patrol Task Force out there on a daily basis looking for these errant drivers and ensuring that they would face the full brunt of the law, may it be ticket or otherwise. So we are asking that you save your money, keep your monies in your pockets, and just, obey the traffic laws. You know that school is open, leave home earlier.
And for our twin island in Tobago, are these measures being put in place over there as well?
Yes, these measures are indeed put in place over there under the stewardship of Assistant Commissioner Rishi Singh. These initiatives are indeed occurring in Tobago as well. It's Trinidad and Tobago, so even though it's a twin island republic, what affects one affects the other.
Yes.
And I mean, we have seen videos where Tobago is not immune or exempted from the issues that we face, even though it's on a smaller scale.
Yeah. And you touched on it a bit, but just to expand a bit more on it, what are some of the safety tips for students as they return to school as well as their parents?
Well, to the students, let me start with the students first. We are asking that you respect the traffic laws as well. I have seen children playing some strange games where they may want to push each other off of the pavement. I will ask them to stop doing that immediately.
Yeah.
Utilize the crosswalk, utilize the walkover, utilize the zebra crossing. Be careful and make sure that the light is on red, that you have the proper signal. Stop attempting to run across the road where the light is on green, even the adults. Stop attempting to run across the road when the light is on green. Sometimes you cannot judge the speed that the vehicle is coming at you at. We are asking students to pay attention on the roadway, reduce the use of that cell phone, the texting, the messaging, because a lot of persons, they are on their phones and they just step into the roadway. Whether it's having a conversation or texting, some of them are not even looking where they are going. So we are asking them to desist from that. We are asking parents to lead by example as well, teach the children the right thing, and you exercise and display the right thing so that you can be an exemplar and show the children that you choose to follow the rules and regulations. We are asking parents again to take their time. Leave home earlier. Be careful, stay off your cell phones when you are driving. So those are just some of the tips to the parents and the students.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I do believe the conversation that we have this morning is very important because, students are looking on, parents are looking on. So it's important that they take these safety tips and really try to improve and do better. Thank you again so much, guys. We're about to take a very short break, but when we return, we have more engaging conversations, so don't go far.
Bill and Ruth fell in love with the Benjamin Moore color Dry Sage, but they tried to match it using another brand's paint.
I mean, it's close enough.
Almost identical, really. Yeah, there it is.
Never trust another paint to be a Benjamin Moore color.
Knowing how to tell authentic is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Find it, match it, search it. Step 1, find the style number on the tag. Step 2, match the style number inside the jersey with the number on the tag. Step 3, search it. A quick Google search of the style number will verify the jersey is authentic when the search results match the jersey being searched. Don't be fooled by counterfeit jerseys. Before you buy, remember to find it, match it, search it.
Fan Zone, 2 locations nationwide. Center City Mall, Chaguanas and Movietown, Port of Spain. Nationwide delivery available.
I want to get a tattoo.
You really
respond
wanna
to me. Respond to me how you would respond to me.
The first question I'll ask is why?
Controversial taboo topics.
We get so consumed by church, we forget that we have to live the life of being a Christian outside of the Sunday.
Like you say,
services.
we think going to a service makes us a Christian.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right. So here we are about to hear the second time Pastor J wanted to take a tattoo.
Would have been late last year and early this year.
Oh gosh.
Hope Unfiltered podcast with Pastor J and Ren.
Welcome back. New data from Central Statistical Office is highlighting the extent of domestic violence in Trinidad and Tobago. We now dive into our Ask the Expert segment for further discussion. From 2010 to 2014, 33,489 domestic violence cases were reported. From this, 2,646 reports stemmed from assault by beating, 8,935 were from threats, 2,423 were from breach of protection, 877 were from sexual abuse, and 866 were malicious damage reports. The figures come amid growing concern over a recent surge in incidents, raising questions not only about safety, but the lasting psychological impact on victims. Today, therapist Sharon Bermudez joins us to speak about the effects of domestic violence and the path towards healing and support. Good morning, Ms. Sharon.
Good morning. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. And you?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me on again.
Absolutely. So what is trauma? We're going right into it. And how does it affect victims of domestic violence? Are there different types of trauma that affects them differently and how they may experience it?
All right. So trauma is basically how we respond to something that is happening in our life. But with trauma, the responses to something that causes very deep distress. It could cause very strong feelings of helplessness and hopelessness, and something that may be life-threatening. Now, not everything that somebody finds traumatic is life-threatening, but in this case, I want to use a definition that a traumatic event is one where there's loss of life or limb, or threat to life or limb, or a combination of both taking place. That doesn't necessarily have to be as a result of domestic violence. I'm just using it because I think it's kind of useful. Yeah. Because with domestic violence, that is the sort of threat that we are dealing with. But in any case, when faced with a situation such as that, that is going to create psychological and emotional and physiological reactions, the trauma reactions that we are familiar with.
Yeah. And with reports showing a rise in the domestic violence cases, how does this impact individuals on that psychological level?
The impact is going to vary, and it depends on a lot of different factors. Domestic violence is so kind of hard to say that if this happens and this happens and this happens, that's going to be somebody who is highly traumatized. And because there's a spectrum of behavior that somebody is experiences. And sometimes it's kind of intuitive, right? If somebody threatens me with a gun, if somebody throws lighter fluid or something over me and holds a match close to me, if somebody beats me until I'm blue or damage to my eyes or something like that, that's going to be traumatic in our brain.
Yes.
We think that that is going to be traumatic, and for many people it will. But then you may have somebody who has experienced what seems to be a lesser event. It may be that they may have been slapped or they may have been cuffed. It wasn't, the repetitions wasn't as much. There wasn't much visible bruising, but that person can also be highly traumatized as well.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say, kind of inelegantly this morning, is that there's a piece of this that is quantifiable, that we could look at the acts of violence that are done against the person, and it could give us a good sense of how traumatic they are. But there's a piece of this that is undefinable, and it's based on person, the person's history, the person's personality and whatnot. And so something that somebody may look at objectively and they see it as something lesser on the scale can indeed be deeply traumatic for the person who was the recipient of it. Because part of it is my internal experience of this thing that has happened to me.
Yeah, and you started touching on it, so just to expand some more, what are some of the common signs that shows someone is experiencing trauma from abuse?
Well, because trauma carries all the areas, physiological, psychological, mental, you can look at each one of those areas and they will give you some information. So, for example, on the emotional side, you could have somebody experiencing a certain level of emotional numbness, which is sort of like they are plugged out from their emotions. They may be describing something that the average person would expect to see intense anger or intense sadness, but they're just giving a story like if it's something that happened to somebody else, and it isn't affecting them at all. And it's not just that they're just giving a story, but the story lacks emotion.
Yeah.
But then you can also have feelings of intense anger. You could have feelings of intense guilt and shame, because that's kind of part of the domestic violence dynamic, is that the person who is the perpetrator may turn it around and blame the situation on the victim, and the victim may take on a certain amount of responsibility and feel guilty and have shame for what they believe that they have done. You can have intense sadness and depression. You can have intense fear, depending on the nature of the threat. Because while we think of domestic violence as largely in terms of physical abuse and sexual abuse, there's actually a wide range of ways to abuse a person. So depending on how it's showing itself, somebody can have a very strong safety threat, and therefore fear is going to be a big emotion. Then on the cognitive side of things, right, in the end of the day, a trauma response triggers off our stress response, and our stress response has a kind of a predictable way that it goes with it. So somebody may experience the feeling of overwhelm, but somebody may also experience the state that is overwhelmed, and all of the cognitive or the thinking symptoms that kind of go with that state. So you may be finding it in some difficulties remembering things. Some people dissociate and lose memory of the thing that is traumatic to them, right? A kind of interesting, well, it was interesting thing to me when I heard it, is that when something traumatic happens, our amygdala in our brain goes on, and the amygdala is a part of the brain that holds memory for physical sensations. So it has actually excellent memory for every physical sensation you have experienced in your life. All of that is located there. So that comes on right away, but the prefrontal cortex goes offline. So for many people, at the time where they're experiencing the traumatic thing, the part of their brain that is thinking actually goes offline. And that may translate itself in some memory issues taking place. You can have concentration issues that are taking place. You can have intrusive memories about the thing that has happened to you. It could come in the form of flashbacks, which is little pieces of it that are coming to you like a trailer in a movie. Or you can have the whole movie, the whole event that is playing in your mind over and over again. There are people who have nightmares and it comes out in their dreams. And there are people who will also have kind of like sleep disturbances coming out of this as well. And on the physiological side, of course, you could have a headache, muscular tension, any one of the normal stress type of symptoms, accelerated heart rate, uncomfortableness, digestive problems. So there's really a wide range of symptomology that kind of falls under this area.
And I believe how you started there, this also ties into what I wanted to find out next in terms of what are some of the long-term effects of domestic violence abuse once it's not, or if it's left unaddressed, and how does it impact a victim's life daily?
Again, this is going to change from person to person. There is not one size fits all. I want to make that clear. But there is no doubt that domestic violence has a very integral impact on a person. It does affect somebody's sense of self and who they are. Context of an intimate relationship. That might be your significant other. That might be a trusted person in your life. It is most likely to be a trusted person in your life. And that person is now threatening you. How do you make sense of it? That person may be telling you it's your fault. If you didn't do this and this, then I would not have done that and that. And when you have that message repeated over and over again, you get to the point where you really begin to kind of internalize it and ask yourself, well, maybe it is my fault. Maybe if I did not do this, or I did not do that, this person seems good, everybody else likes him or her, right? Let me put that in because, again, we tend to think of this as a conversation about women who are experiencing domestic violence, but men are the victims of domestic violence too. I worked previously with a company that is male-dominated, and I have seen males who are victims of domestic violence. So when you get these messages and you are also seeing that that person interacts seemingly well with other members of society, their job, etc., everybody thinks highly of them. A lot of people think highly of them, I should say. Then you can begin to question, really, is it me? So the impact on self-esteem is substantial. It tends to have a correlational relationship with depression, right? So as well as anxiety, I would tend to believe there's a good chance that somebody coming from a domestic violence background is going to struggle with the mood disorders. It tends to impact relationship. One of the stats that was around many, many years ago, I don't know if it's still referenced to, but it suggested that a male who witnessed domestic violence in his family of origin had a greater chance of being a perpetrator of domestic violence. And a female who witnessed domestic violence in their family of origin, which is amongst their parents, have a greater chance of becoming a victim of domestic violence. Now, it does not mean definitively that all males who were victims are going to become perpetrators or witnessed it would become perpetrators, because some will turn away. They will witness it and that will cause them to turn away from. And it doesn't mean that all females who witnessed it will become victims. There are some who will witness it and they will be so hyper-vigilant around it, that they would not keep in a relationship like that.
Yeah.
But it does mean that statistically, they saw a pattern where the modeling that you got from seeing it in your family of origin affected your choices. And therefore, it definitely has a relational component. And even if it doesn't come out in domestic violence, the relational component is going to come out in trust issues as well.
Yeah.
Because that is what you would have seen and witnessed. And now as you enter into your own personal relationships, you are going to have a certain level of alertness. And it is quite possible to take what was done to you and kind of displace it onto that other relationship as well.
Yeah.
So it has those kind of relational dynamics. And then there are usually long-term impacts upon it, when we're talking about children who witnessed domestic violence coming up. You tend to see some long-term impacts as well, academically, in terms of mood, and again, in terms of relationships.
Yeah. And sometimes looking in from an outsider's perspective, many people tend to ask why the victim don't just leave. Can you help us understand how this, how it psychologically factors in, or, behind it, what it looks like?
Okay, so another statistic that has been around for a while has just been a kind of a idea that in the life of a relationship, somebody may try to leave about 7 times before they will leave the final time. So there's come, go kind of a dynamic for many people. The reality of it is that it is a difficult situation to leave.
Yeah.
The reason would vary, again, according to person and circumstances. Sometimes this is amounting to finances, right? Because financially, the person simply cannot afford to leave the situation. Let us think about it just in terms of just the average person right now. The average person right now who is in a relationship is in a 2-income household.
Yeah.
The average person right now who may be having marital or relationship issues and may be thinking about leaving might also be thinking that if I leave right now, that I cannot afford this. I can't afford to live right now on 2 incomes, much less for bringing it down to 1 income. How do I restart? Leave the house, build somewhere else, rent somewhere else. How do I make this feasible, right? So you take that and you pull it across to the person who's in a domestic violence relationship. They have the same thing to consider. How do I survive in this sort of a situation? Many people who stay partly because they're concerned about their children, right? So it seems counterintuitive. If you're concerned about your children, you should want to leave. But just because somebody is a perpetrator of intimate partner violence, it does not mean that they engage in child abuse. So if you sometimes have a situation where the spouse is being abused, but the children are not. Now, that is still psychologically damaging for the children, but like you can end up with a person kind of saying to themselves that I can't offer any better, and I don't want to split up my family, right? So that person themselves may have come from a broken home. That person themselves may have come from a home where they saw domestic violence and they wanted something different for their children. And now they're saying, well, I need to hold on for the sake of my children. It's usually not to the benefits to do that, but that's the thinking that could kind of go into it. And then the other reality of it is simply that, as hard as it may be to understand, this is the person that I love. Yes, there are times when he or she does A, B, or C that I don't like, but then there are other times when he or she is loving and supportive, or we have a good relationship. So then it becomes a little bit of an internal battle, right? How do I balance the good of the relationship with the not so good of the relationship? And many times people will give a chance because in domestic violence, there's a kind of a cycle of abuse. The abusive event might happen, and then after that, they might go into a honeymoon period. And so people kind of get sucked into the honeymoon period. Well, he or she says that they want to change. They seem to be changing. Let me give them another chance. And you keep on doing that until you realize, well, I've given so many chances and the change is not a long-term change.
Yeah.
Those are just some of the reasons why somebody would choose to stay. There are probably many, many more. I guess the main point I would want to bring across is the temptation is there by the people who surround them to shame the person who chooses to stay. But that ultimately is not therapeutic, and it's not really going to lead to any kind of positive outcome. So while it is frustrating to be a loved one of somebody choosing to stay in this situation, it is important to find a means to be able to balance things and to figure out what is the most helpful way to support your loved one while they get to the point where they are ready to leave.
Yeah. And what would the healing process look like for someone who has experienced domestic violence, and how important is it for professionals like yourself, therapy, counseling, to be a part of this journey?
The healing process, like any other healing process, takes time. I think the first step has got to be safety.
Yeah.
There is no, in terms of the model of counseling that I'm trained in, safety is considered to be first. It takes precedence over everything else. And so I don't know how somebody can psychologically heal, or even a couple could relationally heal, unless we put an end to the acts of violence and could assure safety within the space. That definitively has to be taken care of. Aside from safety, people have to make a decision, stay or leave. If I stay, what am I agreeing to stay to? Am I staying in a relationship that is intrinsically unhealthy and potentially unsafe for me, right? Or am I staying, but we are dealing with the safety and we want to deal with the unhealthy dynamics in the relationship? Let us see if we can bring this relationship into a healthy space. The couple counseling work with couples who have domestic violence does not always lean into we need to split. Absolutely. It just leans into the position that it is unacceptable for violence to be part of this relationship. So once we can all agree on that and we can put in the groundwork, there over time, we are looking at how to be able to reestablish trust in the relationship. We are looking at how to address the issues that, other than domestic violence, that is affecting the relationship. We are looking at how to increase skills to cope, because the domestic violence is a negative coping mechanism that somebody is using. Person is going to get angry at some point in the future. When you get angry, what can you do with that anger that is constructive but will not harm you, partner? How do you respond in that situation? If the couple are looking at being together, those are some of the things that they are looking at in order to engage in healing and relational health. If, however, the ship has sailed, there's no path. I am out of this relationship. I may have start and kept on coming back, but I can't take this anymore, and I will not take this anymore. And I just want to be able to move forward with my life. Then the question becomes how to leave safely. Another statistic that is around is that the period of greatest risk for a victim is that point where they are ready to leave. Because when you are ready to leave, it runs the risk that you are going to trigger the abandonment button for the perpetrator. And when you hit that abandonment button, nothing good ever comes out of that. So a decision to leave has to be a decision to leave being aware and managing the risk. Being aware doesn't mean that I stay because I don't want to trigger that. It means that I have to understand that that is a risk that is there, and I have to manage that risk. So there's some safety planning component that is involved in it. And then when I am out, how do I go through that process of emotional healing and kind of putting myself back together and kind of aspiring to the person that I want to be. Now, I do not necessarily think that a mental health professional is 100% needed to facilitate somebody along the healing process. There are some people who can do it on their own with support from key players, members of their family, friendships, if they are part of a spiritual community, support of their spiritual community, their own research online and their own trying things out. There are people who successfully navigate this space. However, there are a lot of people who will struggle, and that is okay. That is normal. And if you do, you just have to be aware that there are people who are trained to help you. And that is a space where mental health comes in. In the area of mental health, you have a range of professionals with a range of different training. There are more than 500 schools, school being a model, for how to do training, how to do counseling, how to do therapy. So we are not all the same person. And just like when you go to a medical doctor, you may go to a GP, but then it turns out that you might have a heart issue, so you need to go to a cardiologist. It may turn out that you may have air issue and you need to go to an ENT specialist, etc. In the field of mental health, there are many of us who could function as kind of generalists, and there are some areas that we have our specialization in, but another specialization is in the work of trauma. So if you are thinking about getting mental health help, then be aware that one person is not equal to the other. Once I go to a counselor, all counselors are experts. All counselors are not experts in the area of trauma. And if the focus of your counseling is about trauma and managing trauma, then ideally speaking, you should actually go to somebody who is a trauma specialist. There are one or two that are here in Trinidad. With that being said, sometimes people don't even want to touch that. They're not ready to go back into that space psychologically and work through the trauma issues. And they are really dealing with, how do I live safely? How do I put myself back together financially? How do I support my kids inside all of this? And then the rest of us professionals have competence to kind of fit into those kind of spaces. So if you're somebody who thinks that you may need help, I would say reach out to somebody. You may not know exactly who is the person to go to, but start somewhere, reach out to a counselor, and hopefully that counselor, in their assessment of the situation, will be able to say which part of it he or she is able to provide support, and which part of it they may need to refer to the person who is the specialist. Because I absolutely believe that nobody should be receiving trauma work from a professional who is not a specialist in trauma. There is too many risks attached with doing that.
And you know, these conversations are so crucial and important to have with persons looking on and they may not know who or where to turn to. And you touched on the two councils that we have, and just to expand a little bit more on it in terms of the different types of services that we offer here locally for victims of domestic violence.
All right, so there are two broad routes you could think about. There's private and there's public.
Yeah.
On the public side of things, we have National Family Services. And National Family Services offers counseling services to Trinidadians Trinidadians, that's the criteria. It's free, and it's they have centers throughout all of the different localities in Trinidad. It is possible for somebody to go to National Family Services, and National Family Services can also redirect. So a National Family Services, I'm subject to correction. Please, if anybody from National Family Services is hearing this and needs to correct me. They most likely are largely staffed by people who are generalists, as opposed to somebody who is a trauma specialist, right? But again, that doesn't mean that they can't help. There's some role that they can play, and then most likely they can kind of feed you back into the parts of the government system that can access more specialized services. We also have the work of the Domestic Violence Hotline, which is a 24/7 hotline. 800-SAVE, S-A-V-E, I believe is the number. And somebody who is the victim of domestic violence can call that hotline when they are in crisis, and they provide some level of crisis support and also some assistance towards getting people into shelters. There are shelters in Trinidad and Tobago as well. And there are some NGOs that provide support in domestic violence. So on the public side, there are quite a few services that are available. And people are also not aware that Rape Crisis Society does quite a lot of work with domestic violence, not just with rape. So somebody can access services from Rape Crisis Society as well. So there are several places, but you're not sure where to start. I think a good starting point is National Family Services, who can probably network and move you along to the other services that are available. And then on the private side, now you just have this amazing world of who do I go to?
Yeah.
It depends on your goal. If your goal is like you are out of the relationship, you have left the relationship, as I said, you are now in the point of trying to kind of pull together things and get past the trauma and to do intense trauma work, then that is to go to a trauma specialist. And you need to be able to access those. There are not a lot of bodies on the ground for that, but they do exist. So you may be needed to, just like you would go to a doctor, a GP, and the GP would refer, go to a counselor who would be aware of who are those specialists and be referred on to that specialist. If it is you're not ready for that area, but again, you're still trying to piece yourself life together. But it's a lot more everyday type issues that kind of fit with what somebody like me does. That is just a matter of finding a counselor that is near to you, that is qualified, has adequate qualification as a counselor, and experience, and you have a comfort with that person, and starting that process with them. Counseling, private, you're paying for it. So one of the things you're taking into consideration is the fees, and can I afford counseling? Because counseling is something you don't do it once a month or once every, in an ideal world, you're doing it once a week. In a less than ideal world, you could get away with twice a month. So you have to think about all that. Can I afford it? And where am I accessing it? Because the fees are widely ranging. Some people are on the high end and some people are on the low end. So sometimes you have to let your finger do the walking and find that person who best suits you. It is not an exhaustive resource because not everybody is part of TTAP. but TTAP is a psychological association, and if a counselor is a member of TTAP, they will be on a directory. And that directory will have what is the person's qualification, where they work from, their contact number, etc. So one resource, if you don't know where to start, is to just go to TTAP page and look. But as I said, that is not an exhaustive list of all counselors. There are many counselors who are not part of TTAP. So tap into your network. That could be a medical practitioner. That could be a church. People who may have a knowledge of practitioners based on their experience of working with them.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sharon, for shedding light on important issues like this and even sharing about the support provided here locally for those who actually need it. We're about to take another short break, and when we come back, we have more engaging conversations, so stay close.
Maybe he landed here totally by coincidence. But if by chance he's admiring your fresh coat of Benjamin Moore soft sky blue, well, that's a pretty high compliment. Coming from an expert.
Our award-winning show is back, and this season promises to be even more exciting than before. What's Up, Doc isn't just a title, it's a call to action for anyone who wants to improve their health and well-being. Join us on this thrilling ride towards better health on WESN Content Capital.
This is Face of Sports, WESN Content Capital. How you felt about the kiss on the lip?
That's the business. I'm nothing to do with that.
I find that was distasteful.
The national senior team, whether you like it or not, that is the model for all other teams to follow.
I'm assuming that the regional requirement may be a much stricter requirement.
This is not about Pro League and Super League. This is a league run by the Normalization Committee that I'm responsible for.
Nobody expected FIFA to fund this arrangement.
If we don't get a professional attitude towards this, we are doomed for failure.
You break the balance, trip the leg, control the body.
They ain't gonna stand put forever.
Why you want the Chiefs to lose so? Why you want the Chiefs to lose so?
They already have two. Lamar don't
Why?
have.
You're jealous because you know the Chiefs getting closer to the Patriots. Let's go to the last part.
No,
of the
not no.
Let's go to the last part.
This is 10 Questions. I'm Andy Johnson. The distance from where we should be in the world in going forward on our commitments with climate change.
The effects of climate change that cannot be accounted for, it's called loss and damage, and we're seeing loss and damage happening so much more in this decade and the previous decade.
The principal term there was this question of the correspondent banking issues.
That is why we're trying to build capacity with this country here, Trinidad and Tobago, and other countries in the region. Man is not showing any signs of stopping or even slowing down. More than half of the forest in Trinidad is already gone.
All the plants and all the animals and all of the nice clean water and fresh air and everything had to be on this planet for humanity to have a chance.
We have small change when it comes to countries that can take decisions, and when they speak, the world listens.
The General Assembly is a very democratic forum. And Trinidad and Tobago has the same vote as Canada, in spite of the obvious difference in size.
Welcome back, and we're sticking with our Ask the Experts segment. Guyana's President Dr. Mohamed Ifran Ali called for a 72-hour meeting between Trinidad and Tobago's government and Guyana to seriously engage in establishing a strong economic partnership. political science lecturer at the University of the West Indies, Dr. Morkesh Basdio, joins us this morning to discuss this topic from a political standpoint. Good morning, Dr. Basdio.
Hi, good morning, and good morning to all your viewers and listeners.
So we're going to dive right in. From a political standpoint, what is your opinion of this 72-hour conversation request from Guyana's president?
Well, I think the essence of this request is to really iron out some of the, let's say, the concerns that the government of Guyana would have with regard to Trinidad and Tobago. And from reading from the statement by President Ali, it really has to do more with the bureaucratic or administrative issues that relates to how do we have a seamless sort of trading relation between Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago. Now, from a political standpoint, that the statement from President Ali is really signaling an intent to strengthen not only talk about bilateral agreement between both countries, but to actually further it in what we call other areas like energy and other aspects that it relates to the Guyana economy. So it is positive from coming from the Guyanese side. It is ready to address certain key what you call stumbling blocks or hurdles that the Guyanese administration primarily sees in relation to the administration in Trinidad and Tobago, and speaking in the context of the various rules, the regulations that governs what we call trade to allow easy access and the free movement of, let's say, personnel and persons between both countries.
And how would you describe the current relationship between the two countries?
I would describe the relation between the two countries as cordial. I mean, we have seen since this new administration has come into office, there has been attempts to actually strengthen that, and there have been a number of statements being made by ministers and government officials on both sides. One of the strongest, I think, that came from the President Ali would have come in the form of the willingness for Guyana's oil to be refined in Trinidad and Tobago. We all are familiar with this administration's attempt to restart the Point-to-Pierre refinery, and therefore the source of crude oil would become a significant issue. And knowing that the fact that we can source crude from, let's say, as close as Guyana, it really augurs well for Trinidad and Tobago in the restarting of the refinery. And this is a significant gain in that where the refinery is able to actually source its crude. Now, crude oil can be sourced from many international suppliers, but I think the focus that we can refine Guyana's crude together in conjunction with what is produced in Trinidad is it works well for the economics and also for the financial rewards for the refinery altogether.
And President Ali pointed out to several bureaucratic issues that could hinder this partnership, such as immigration system employed at Trinidad and Tobago's airports and border control issues. He also pointed to improving Caribbean airlines. What is your take on this?
Well, if we take the last one that you just mentioned there, Caribbean Airlines, I think President Ali is really looking for what we call airlift capacity. And he views that Caribbean Airlines can play a significant role in assisting Guyana's what we call airlift capacity. Therefore, what he may be calling for is more flights that could be directed towards Guyana, whether from what we call from the major areas which Caribbean Airlines actually fly from, the various airports, whether it be in primarily United States and possibly the Caribbean. Because Guyana has become a major hub, and we have seen when another international carriers have now directed operation towards Guyana. So I think in this context, Mr. Ali is really looking to increase the airlift capacity into Guyana and out of Guyana, and therefore the whole flight configuration for Caribbean Airlines to divert more of its resources into Guyana. So that is something that is worthwhile. And why would he place it on the agenda? Because Caribbean Airlines is a state entity, and therefore the government of Trinidad and Tobago will play a significant part in strengthening that type of what you call relationship that that President Ali actually wants. So the other two issues on what you call border control and other issues, we can see that this may have been a sore point in the relationship between the Guyanese government or governments in the past and current Trinidad and Tobago administration. There are a number of areas where we talk about that. If I can use one of an example, for example, the movement of, let's say, not only food in the form of, let's say, sugar, rice, and so forth, but in the area of, let's say in the area of like animals and so forth, is there port restrictions that will allow for the free flow or purchase of, let's say, livestock and so forth from one country to the other. These simple bureaucratic issues, what we call port health issues and so forth, would have been a significant point of contention in the past. So it is these simple bureaucratic issues, or shall we say, administrative issues, that the president is actually trying to address to really strengthen the trading relationship between Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana at this point in time.
And given the recent tensions between Trinidad and Tobago and CARICOM, do you think this could strengthen regional unity or create competition among member states?
Well, in the context of Trinidad and Guyana, what we have seen is that there's a comparative advantage for Trinidad and Tobago because the two countries are really looking into the area of the energy sector. And we are speaking about oil and gas and so forth. And this will bring us into conjunction because when this administration came into office, there was a significant move to create this trilateral sort of agreement by moving into some sort of area with regard to Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Suriname. And these three countries are primarily Guyana and Suriname over the last, let's say, 5 years have made significant strides in what they call their oil discoveries and offshore oil discoveries. Trinidad and Tobago has been one of the oldest, let's say, producer of oil, therefore has what not only the technical capacity, but what they call the labor capacity also to assist its CARICOM colleagues in this context. So Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Suriname will form a significant, let's say, partnership, especially with the energy sector. So this is where you can see that there are similarities now between these three, Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago currently, because of the energy sector. And Trinidad has what we call the technical capacity, the labor capacity to assist Guyana in furthering the development of its oil sector in Guyana itself. So there is a sort of a symbiotic relationship that exists between. Let's say with the other CARICOM countries, we can talk about, well, we have been there, we are here, and we have had significant, let's say, a foothold in CARICOM, primarily in what we call the non-energy sector, primarily in manufacturing and in service sector. We can Trinidad and Tobago visibility is there within the region, in the banking and insurance sector, in manufacturing sector. We can say that Trinidad and Tobago has made significant, let's say, strides into the CARICOM region.
And what would you say is one key thing the public should understand about the political implications of this proposed partnership?
Well, the proposed partnership is, we have reached a point we can't really foresee, well, what does this partnership will actually look like. We are seeing that President Ali is actually making the statement that he requires 3 days of sit-down of meetings to actually work out. But from looking at the statement itself, what comes out to be clear is that President Ali is serious about sitting down for 3 days to negotiate and to resolve some of what we call these technical and administrative issues that has become what we call hurdles for what we call the free movement and possibly the free trade between and among what we call Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana. And from his side, he has seen that there are significant issues that need to be resolved from the Trinidad and Tobago side. So it is mutually beneficial for both Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago. More so that since Trinidad and Tobago is trying to broaden its area in energy and also in the non-energy sector with regard to its involvement in Guyana's economy, because Guyana's economy is the largest growing economy in the world today per GDP. So it is what we call a frontier, because they are a frontier country, that where there's vast amount of what we call revenues to be earned in what we call collaborative partnership between not only the governments of both Guyana and the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, but primarily we are talking about what we call what is the manufacturing and the private sector gains in both countries.
And looking ahead, what would you say success or partnership could look like over the next few years?
Well, the partnership arrangements between it, I think, will start at the state level and then works its way down towards what we call the private sector. Because initially what we are looking at is the state-to-state arrangement that is going to remove some of the administrative hurdles that President Ali have identified. The removal of these, we call it these administrative hurdles and port and border control hurdles will allow for now the private sectors in both countries to actually engage one another at a greater scale. But I think President Ali recognized that the way to move forward is how to move at the state level, where the governments and the respective heads of governments would be in a position to actually resolve some of these administrative problems that would allow for what we call the free movement of, let's say, not only goods and services, but people also, but to strengthen the collaboration between both countries. So it has to start from what we call the state level. And the hope is that once it starts at this level, then the other primary sectors, primarily the private sector, will be engaging with one another, which will be beneficial and fruitful for both countries in the near future.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vasville, for sharing it from a political standpoint. Now we speak with economist and former director of economics at Caribbean Development Bank, Dr. Justin Ram, to discuss what this potential partnership can mean for our country. Good morning. Dr. Ram. So we're going to continue with the flow of it. Guyana's president has called for a closer economic collaboration with Trinidad and Tobago. How significant is this proposal given the state of both countries' economic?
Well, I think it's a fantastic proposal. And I think Trinidad and Tobago should grasp it with both hands. And certainly, I think the president of Guyana has already indicated how he thinks this particular proposal should kick off. He has indicated that both countries should get stakeholders together and lock them up perhaps in a room for 72 hours and really thrash out what is required to move this particular proposal forward. And that is excellent. I've never heard a president or prime minister of the region speak so forcefully about what he considers to be a priority and how to go about implementing it. Because in fact, what he has indicated there is a well-known strategy within implementation circles as to how you go about implementing a priority. And so I think at this point in time, given where Trinidad and Tobago's economy is and where Guyana obviously is, has been the fastest growing economy in the world for the last couple of years. And in fact, over the last 4 years, I think that their economy has probably quintupled. Trinidad has a great opportunity to build those bridges now with Guyana. Now, when you think about some of the past decisions that were perhaps made in Trinidad and Tobago, in particular, the closure of the oil refinery at Pointe-à-Pierre, we see what a terrible strategic decision that was. If that refinery was open, we would have really have a wonderful opportunity to now get that refinery operating at almost near capacity. But there are other areas where Trinidad and Tobago, as well as Guyana, can collaborate. There's a lot of construction activity going on there. Trinidad has great construction firms. We have wonderful people here with skills that can work in the oil and gas industry.
Yeah.
And I think most importantly here, there is a great opportunity for both countries to work together to help build food security for this region.
So as you touched on the food part of it, there was mention of agriculture partnership benefiting both countries from products like soya beans and cocoa. Given regional importation issues, could this help reduce food imports cost for either country?
It can help reduce costs not only for both Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago, but I think for the entire region. It is well known that Guyana has a landmass, and perhaps we could also consider Suriname as part of this. But Guyana has a landmass to allow it to become almost a food basket of the region.
Right.
If we are able to now reduce our overall average cost of production in agriculture by utilizing that landmass, and then perhaps with Trinidad and Tobago's already built up technologies in food processing, we can have a sort of a win-win approach here. And that means that the products that are produced in Guyana, perhaps processed in Trinidad and Tobago, can then be sold throughout the wider region, as it were, and therefore bringing down food costs. But it's more than just bringing down the cost of food. We are in a time now where we have so many tensions globally. We know what's happening in the Middle East. We know what's happening around us geopolitically. It is high time that this region really now thinks about building resilience. And that one of the key areas that we need to build resilience in is actually in food security, and agricultural production domestically is the way to go about doing that.
And do you think this could set a precedent for other CARICOM nations given the tensions between Trinidad and Tobago and CARICOM?
Of course, of course. Now, let's make it clear there's a lot of this talk about the tension within CARICOM, and that tension is more procedural and around governance issues. When it comes to the economics of the region, there is no doubt that these countries are better together. I think I want to make that clear. There's no doubt that these countries are better together. The governance issues we need to resolve to help us implement faster and to move the integration process along. Now, when it comes to this, I think that this can be almost the glue that keeps us together. Because if you look at all of the food import bills for every country in CARICOM, it's excessively high. In some countries you can visit, including perhaps those in Eastern Caribbean and Barbados, you can hardly find a domestically produced product. And when I say that, that is not good. How can countries become resilient and self-sufficient and be able to weather the constant crises that we currently have now if we don't produce our own food? That's a basic of any nation building. And I think as a region, of course, we have small economies and therefore we have diseconomies of scale. But if we do that regionally, we can get the economies of scale to help us be successful in doing that. And let me just say one more thing. Agriculture is and it can be quite labor intensive. We have a lot of excess labor in this region, and we have to find a way to employ that labor efficiently within our own markets. Because what tends to happen, as we all know, is that we have this brain drain. We don't have enough jobs for people, and so they are leaving. They can't take care of their families. And so the way to go about doing that is to start producing more at home. And this is a perfect way for us to sort of kickstart that initiative to have more domestic production at home.
Definitely. And would you say this is a step closer to closing major gaps in our economic sector between regional countries?
I think so. I think so. So there is a natural linkage now between Suriname, Guyana, and Trinidad and Tobago, the three most southern countries of CARICOM. And I think a similar linkage is happening in the north. Yes, with perhaps Jamaica, Belize, Bahamas to some extent, and well, non-CARICOM countries like Dominican Republic. And then we have the middle countries with the Eastern Caribbean and of course Barbados within there. There's a great opportunity for now to have this economic linkage with this anchor at the south, anchor in the north, and of course we have those countries in the middle, of course, consolidating the market. This is how I think we have to start thinking strategically about regional integration. It is not whether we should do it, we must do it if we want to survive in the constant crisis that we are constantly experiencing in this world. We have to focus on regional integration, and one of the ways to do that is to focus on producing more at home. And I think agriculture is a perfect example for us to do it. Of course, there's energy as well, which we can start focusing on. I know there's talk about perhaps building, linking power lines between Suriname, Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, and perhaps even linking up through the Eastern Caribbean. You know, we can build a regional grid as well. It is time for us to start thinking strategically, because what has happened, if I'm just say this, is that we are focused on efficiency. It's a lot more efficient for us to import everything that is produced cheaply overseas. But strategically and in terms of resilience, that is not good for us. We have to start thinking about producing more at home. And I think this initiative by the President of Guyana should be grasped with both hands and worked towards. And he's given us the roadmap as to how to go about doing it. And hopefully the private sector and the government within Trinidad and Tobago will collaborate with their counterparts in Guyana and get this done for us.
And the final question for both you and Dr. Bastille with us. How might this shift, you know, how does this shift balance the influence within the region? So, which Dr. Ram, you can go first, and then Dr. Bastille, you can go after.
I'll go first. I think Trinidad, so we all know that Trinidad and Tobago has been the economic powerhouse in CARICOM for quite some time, perhaps since CARICOM was born. Now we have Guyana becoming much more economically strong, and it's a pity it's taken so long, because when you look at Guyana's resources, it should have been a much stronger economy a long time ago. But better late than never.
Agreed.
What Trinidad and Tobago needs, and what its economy needs, and people in Trinidad and Tobago require, are strong trading partners. And with Guyana growing, I can see that only being beneficial for Trinidad and Tobago. That's what we want. We want to be tied to strong trading partners, and Guyana in return also wants to be tied to strong trading partners. In return, we need the rest of CARICOM to also become strong. And I think that this is a perfect opportunity to do this. And let me just say that we need, within this new framework, to encourage a free movement of labor. Because there's going to come a point, and I think Guyana has already reached that point, where they don't have enough labor at home. Guyana's population is less than 1 million people. The economy is booming. Very soon, Trinidad and Tobago is going to be booming again, and we will need labor. And there are countries within CARICOM that have excess labor, and we need to encourage that. That is a way to actually build cohesion as well. And that, I want to say, is an important part of this next step in the integration process. We have to ensure that there's cohesion and that we have convergence. So if the Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, Suriname are growing strong, we have to ensure that the rest of CARICOM is also pulled along and also growing strong, so that that maintains the cohesion of the regional integration movement. Yes.
Thank you for that. And Dr. Bastille, same thing. Dr. Bastille, I want to believe that you are muted on your end, so can you just start again?
Great. Okay. So what I was saying is that the synergy that exists among the 3 southern CARICOM member states, those are the 2 on the South American mainland, Guyana and Suriname and Trinidad and Tobago, that there exists a synergy that exists in the form of what we call the energy sector. But it provides an opportunity on the governance side to resolve certain issues that may have been plaguing CARICOM for the last decades. And that is what we have various issues. We talk about agreements, what they call the free movement of labor, free movement of skilled personnel between and among CARICOM member states, but there are still significant administrative issues. So the call by the Guyanese president to resolve certain administrative and bureaucratic issues, to strengthen what we call the collaboration between and among these 2 CARICOM member states, can only augur well for what it will have for what we call the greater CARICOM, because it will set the pace that if Trinidad and Tobago bilaterally can resolve these issues, then the issues can be resolved among the other members of CARICOM. So there's a win-win situation when we think in the context of both Trinidad and Tobago and also in relation to CARICOM as a whole.
And my last and final question for both of you guys, how would this relationship impact the average citizens in both countries? We just talked about it on a regional level, but let's just, boil down a bit on how it impacts the citizens for both Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana in that essence.
Well, first of all, there are going to be more jobs. As we know, trade tends to expand your markets, and when that happens, we're going to find that our producers at home are likely to start producing more, and that means that they will likely hire more people. So that's the first thing. Now, with this expanded production, there is likely to be this influx of new goods. Also, with our production costs likely to decrease now because our economies of scale are expanding. That average cost of production will likely decrease, and it's likely what will happen is that we'll have a reduction in the overall, perhaps, inflation rate of the country. That's really good. So there are two dividends here, I think, for Trinidad and Tobago, and of course for the citizens of Guyana. One, an expanded opportunity in terms of employment, and then of course expanded opportunities in that you're going to get more bang for your buck. Your dollar is going to go further because now you're going to be consuming more of goods that are produced locally. And as you know, within CARICOM, we have this what's called the common external tariff. So when things are coming in, they have to be, there's a tariff rate for them, a minimum tariff rate. If those goods are produced internally within the market, they are not subject to those tariffs. So therefore, those goods are likely to be cheaper. That's what we want. You want to be producing and consuming more at home. I think currently Trinidad and Tobago perhaps imports about 70% of what it consumes. We have a great opportunity to reduce that number, and I think it should be in the opposite direction. It means if we're producing maybe close to 70% of what we consume. And I think that is now the first step in our acknowledgement of being able to do this. It starts with agriculture, then it goes into food processing, and then other manufacturing then tends to take off from there. The opportunities, it becomes this lovely virtuous cycle, as it were, for us to now catapult our economies into where we need to be. And I guess what has to happen here is that I know that my fellow presenter online is at the University of the West Indies. I said that the University of the West Indies and all tertiary level education institutions within the region have to play a much stronger role. We need the research to back up what we're doing in terms of technology, but also in terms of how to do things better for our region. What tends to happen is that we always tend to follow some foreign written textbook. That may not be applicable for our circumstances. We need the university to do research that is pertinent to our challenges and our issues so that we can start producing more efficiently, given our circumstances, our environment, in not only in terms of political and economic, but also in terms of our natural environment. How do you produce more efficiently given what we have here in the region? And that, I think, needs to come from our tertiary level institutions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ram. Dr. Basdeo?
I think the opportunity is there for Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana to strengthen its relationship. It can only be seen in a win-win situation between the two countries itself and CARICOM in general, because Guyana is basically its vast resources, as Dr. Ram have indicated, is there for exploitation. And if I could just bring one of the statements that President Ali had actually talked about, is that the absence of, let's say, CARICOM member states, and primarily Trinidad for Trinidad and Tobago involvement in Guyana's mineral industry, toward gold and diamond industry, that it doesn't seem to have that level of investment coming from Trinidad and Tobago, recognizing that possibly Trinidad manufacturing sector can play a significant part in developing Guyana's gold industry in this context. So there is benefits that needs to be to gain from these issues, but primarily the President Ali is recognizing that to achieve these economic gains, we have to resolve what he called the governance issues. And I think this is where he's speaking about this 72-hour sit down to resolve these issues. So it's hopefully that he from his side, he will have what is required And then from the Trinidad and Tobago side, we will have what we call ways and means that it will bring about these changes. I would think that the requirements to resolve the governance issues in what we call the trade relations between both countries would require some sort of, let's say, amendments to laws and regulations. So this is where the governance issue and the political side actually plays a significant part in trying to resolve and have a smooth trading relationship between Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, and possibly the model that will be set there can be further worked out to expand throughout what you call wider CARICOM region.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Ram, Dr. Basdeo, for coming in and sharing such insightful comments and, you know, making sure that we see it from not just an outsider's perspective, but getting to see it from the political and economical sense of it all. And guys, that's it for the show today. And, you know, as we wrap up again, thank you to all our guests for coming on and being a part of today's conversation. We really hope that you took away something meaningful from it. And as I always end, stay safe, stay informed, stay positive. We do have Sean Michael Small up next at 8 with Talking Points, so don't go anywhere. And I'll see you back here again tomorrow morning. Bye.
WESN.
If these walls could talk, they'd cry uncle. They didn't plan to become offices or yoga studios, but they've stood by us, even when we got a little stir-crazy. For that, they deserve some thanks.